So let's talk through the contents of the brand new and shiny Death Korps of Krieg army set, how many points are in the box, what's the discount, and is it looking like a good deal overall? Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about the big new Death Korps box set, having a focused look as to all the new shiny guard stuff coming out, and talking in a little bit more detail about the contents. This box set has been really quite a long time coming for the Astra Militarum. We certainly had a bunch of hints that God were going to be getting something in 10th edition from the previous rumour engines. Then Games Workshop gave us the hint that Death Korps would be getting a big range, but it took quite a long time for them to actually come out with any examples of them. And when they did on the World Champions of Warhammer preview, they wound up dropping the entire range, it would seem, with the centrepiece being the great big Death Korps Krieg army set launch box. This one has the vast majority of the units in it that will then go on to be released individually later, and then also when the Codex comes along, there'll be the heavy weapon teams and Commissar Command Squad, which seem to be the releases that aren't included in this box. For the release date, most people are expecting this to be January 2025. They said that it would be 2025 that the Guard will be coming out, and I'd kind of be surprised if it was any later than that, given that it's already been quite a long gap between codexes. The Blood Angels with their launch box and then full codex release after that were a fairly long time ago now, so hopefully they announce it for pre-order sometime early in January, and then it'll be likely somewhere between 4 to 8 weeks between that and the full individual codex release, the Guard book going on sale individually, or the individual squads coming out, plus potentially any other supporting things like reboxes or minor character releases of stuff that had already been done before in some way. It does have the rather unfortunate effect that Guard will be in points limbo for a fair bit of time, having all the new rules but not having the new points for them, and that does mean that they'll likely still be playing with index rules in competitive events and things until either February or March. This does seem to be a bit of a recurring theme in 10th edition. I can't help but think it slows down the momentum a little bit. In general, Games Workshop tend to treat these boxes as sort of a pre-sale as opposed to the first launch. Supply of these things should be better than most battle forces that they come out with. They did have quite a lot of the Deathwing, Blood Angels and Kroot boxes, but demand also tends to be higher as well, though generally easily enough of the Kroot boxes to go around. It varied a little bit depending on location for the Deathwing and the Blood Angels, but hopefully there's enough in circulation that people can get their hands on one if they want one. Pricing wise, I'd expect it to be £145, $230 or €185 or thereabouts. I believe that was the price tag for the Blood Angels army set, and there haven't been any further price rises since then, so I'd hope that that will remain constant for this one. As Games Workshop's more standard price for a launch box, it does seem to tally quite well with the cost of the models at least and their usual discounts. The Death Korps of Krieg are certainly a fan favourite army. They've got really quite a big following out there in their own right. They were originally introduced by Forge World as a World War I themed army with plenty of gas masks, cavalry and big pounding artillery, and they have some pretty horrendous lore, fighting a grueling centuries-long civil war to remain loyal to the Imperium, the soldiers being backgrown and famously happy to lay down their lives in the defence of the Imperium of Man. They were pretty much the biggest standalone Forge World army out there for 40k when that was a thing, and now in the context of all Forge World things going away, it's nice to see a good chunk of that actually make the jump into plastic. The vast majority of other armies out there with their Forge World stuff haven't been so lucky. In any case, this is the contents of their launch box. It's going to have the new Guard Codex with limited edition art on it, new datasheet cards, 2 sets of 5 Death Riders of Krieg, 1 set of 5 Combat Engineers and their remote mine, a great big artillery team with a massive gun, and then the Krieg special character Lord Marshal Dreer. It does seem to give a good microcosm of what Krieg are about. Pretty nice to see their fun cavalry models there, which is certainly some of the more sought after units out of them. Then basically a unique artillery piece, and pretty much a special weapons squad, except redone as combat engineers. It is basically only an 18 model box set though, and which while quite a lot of the models are fairly big chunky cavalry ones, it doesn't feel enormously heavy on the weight of plastic compared with some perhaps. While we're on the subject of the Krieg box, I'll just quickly mention that it's going to be the subject of the Warspets Tactics January giveaway. Each month on the channel I do a big giveaway for some people to get some big box sets of Warhammer 40k. For the channel's January giveaway, there'll be 8 copies of the Death Korps box, and entered in all the usual ways for the channel, either for anyone supporting the channel on Patreon and helping support the videos, or entering for free via Facebook, via supporting on social media, and I'll cycle back to this with the full entry rules at the end of the video. Talking through the models though, let's start out with the headline act, which are the Death Riders of Krieg. These guys ride their rather infamous clawed steeds, not really quite horses though they might resemble them, given serial numbers not names, and generally acting as outrider cavalry, very much fitting with the vague World War I style theming. These guys get las carbines with either loadouts, and then it looks like they've got the option to either fight with sabres or with hunting lances. I don't know how well they're going to be balanced between the two of them. I guess the hunting lancers will have a similar sort of profile to the rough riders. The sabres might be a bit better at dispatching lighter infantry. I can't help but think that it's odds on for the hunting lancers to do a bit better though. In general, the models were really quite well received, I think. Weird, disturbing clawed steeds in gas masks, rather sinister cavalrymen riding them, and charging at full tilt into the enemy, with a good sense of motion on quite a lot of these, I think. I feel like the biggest criticisms I did see of them were maybe more of the paint scheme looking a bit different to the Forge World ones. I feel like you could paint them a lot more gritty looking though, like the Forge World ones, as opposed to the maybe slightly cleaner heavy metal style ones here. For pricing of these guys, it'll likely be around £40 or $62.50 for 5 of them. That's based on the Rough Riders, which feel very equivalent to me. It sounds like the role for them in the Codex is going to be sort of scouting disruption cavalry, as opposed to more heavily melee damage dealers like the Attillans might be. They did say that their datasheet special rule would be that they're getting a reactive move, so one of those ones where they get to move if the enemy moves within 9 inches of them. That's often quite powerful, kind of similar to the Cerberus Raiders maybe. It looks like they're keeping that since their Forge World Index datasheet, so no major changes there, I guess. Then we've got the great big gun of the box, the artillery team. I think there was always a good chance we were going to see something like this with all the artillery pieces that the Krieg could field. It does have a lot of similar feelings with the Field Ordnance Battery, I think, though, just basically that, but even bigger and backed up by a whole bunch of sandbags. 3 Kriegsmen throwing an artillery piece, and you can either have a heavy mortar on the top right, a multiple rocket launcher on the bottom right, a big heavy-hitting siege cannon that's apparently going to be damage 3, or a quad gun. Again, this one seems to have been nicely enough received in terms of the model. A fun 3-crewed artillery piece that I think does what it needs to do. This one's the quad gun version. Maybe not super hopeful for the artillery piece being strong in 10th edition though. Occasionally they've had indirect fire weapons get good, but whenever they do tend to, it seems to be that they get nerfed fairly shortly after. And to be honest, for the Guard Codex, they've got so much competition that both have to have strong indirect fire and also outcompete things like the Basilisks and Manticores and things. The other rules hint that we got for these guys is that the multiple rocket launcher will get anti-infantry 3+. This one's probably the one that I'm most unsure about the pricing of. I went for the same price as a Chimera for this, $65 or £37.50. That'll put it a bit more than the Field Ordnance Batteries, though maybe it'll just wind up being the same price as those if we're lucky. I feel like I could see that being reasonable enough, given that you only get one of these where you get 2 of them. Then we've got the Combat Engineer Squad, again the return of another classic style unit. Interestingly, these have 6 models in the squad, including their remote mine that you can see on the bottom right, or an operator guy for him. The majority of the squad can either take shotguns or pistol and trench club, and it looks like one's got the option for a flamer. For these guys, I'd guess they might be along the same sort of lines as the Command Squad perhaps, so that'd be $45 or £28 for a unit. With the rules previews, Games Workshop said that they have the Scouts rule, they can use the grenade stratagem for free for their demolitions, and the remote mine does some mortal wound damage to a nearby unit, maybe kind of similar to things like bomb squigs for the Orcs maybe. I'd guess they'll have a 4+ save as well with that carapace armour. They do look a little bit more up-armoured. I quite like the way that the mine propels itself along on screws. Then we've got Lord Marshal Dreer, whose sprue leaked out the other day. His lore as being a frontline commander for the Krieg, thought to be indestructible, and notably very hard to kill, and he gets a lot of respect for doing the same dirty frontline work as the people under his command, maybe embodying the Krieg doctrine of self-sacrifice. Apparently he's got a revive on death rule, and if he leads Death Riders he gives them devastating wounds on the charge, so really quite a big punch there. I'm a little bit uncertain as to his pricing. I'd guess he's probably going to be a little bit cheaper than Lord Solar, who feels like maybe the more big central faction commander. He is a named character with a similar sort of stature though, so he could be just the same price. I've estimated just a little bit less than him going for the same price as the Chaplain on bike. Again, that feels like a fairly equivalent miniature from the Space Marine lineup, unless he winds up paying the special character tax over that. I quite like all the fun barbed wire on his base there, the creepy bionics for his horse, and he's got the option to be assembled with a pistol versus sabre. Next up, we've got the Guard Codex, which will be the first of 2025. 5 detachments in a combined regiment, siege detachment, mechanised assault, hammer of the Emperor with tanks, and recon detachment. This will be £37 or $60, plus you get the limited edition artwork. Then we've got this one as the more standard artwork for the Codex, which I think actually looks rather good. I probably prefer this one out of the 2 myself, but this is the one that they'll release later when the actual full release for the faction comes out. Then finally we've got the datasheet cards, unit profiles for quick reference, which I think are handy enough to have in game. Quite nice that you can just take along the ones that you're using for your army. They usually tend to have the combat patrol datasheets in here as well, which are often a little bit simpler than otherwise. These are typically priced at £20.50 or $35. Unfortunately a bit expensive for Games Workshop for printed paper, as is normal for them. Putting things together, I was interested to have a bit of an estimate as to the points in the box and the discount. Obviously both of these are a little bit up in the air at the moment as we don't have confirmed numbers on anything. For points in the box, I put Marshal Dreer at 80, Lord Solar's 120, and while he looks interesting, I don't think he'll be anywhere near that kind of calibre. The Death Riders are currently 70 points in the index, and there's no indication they've changed too much since that. I guess they might get a little bit cheaper if they wanted to emphasise them as the next big thing. For the artillery team, I went for 120 based on the Earthshaker carriage for the Death Korps now. I guess will probably be a little bit cheaper than things like Manticores and Basilisks, given that you don't get a great big armoured vehicle to mount the chassis on. And then we've got the Combat Engineer squad. I went for 60 points based on the command squad there. I'm not sure how close that'll wind up being. Scions are 50 points but get Deep Strike. It strikes me that there'll be a unit that's really quite easy to kill but does have quite a lot of threat with all their mortal wounds between free grenades and that remote mine. Putting it all together, that will be somewhere in the region of 400 points or so. I think it was always going to be a low points one for a guard box that didn't have a focus on heavy armour. But it does mean that it's a box set that if you're trying to get a guard army together of any given size, it's not going to get you that much closer. That's add up to a 1.7 points per dollar, which really isn't good even for normal 40k kits, never mind a big discount box set. Again, it does feel like one of those sets that really underlines just how expensive guard are to collect if you go by the normal Games Workshop route. When building up my forces, I certainly made a very heavy use of second-hand models, and I feel like these days you could also make some good use of Wargames Atlantic type infantry miniatures to fill out the rank and file if you wanted. In terms of the discount saving in the box versus buying things separately though, let's have a look at that. As mentioned, my guess for this would be £145, $230 or €185. And putting together my estimates for the other things, they come to around about £388 or £275, and that would add up to a 40% discount on contents if you include the data cards and the codex at full price. Obviously that's a little bit more of a shaky figure. Some of the things inside the box could cost differently, and the box set itself could be different from that, but feels like it's likely going to be around about that mark. It does mean that, as normal for these box sets, if you were looking to pick up the content separately, it does look like it's going to be a reasonable saving. Obviously far more so if you can get it at a 15% discounter versus having to buy from Games Workshop though, otherwise quite a lot of that gets eaten up. On the face of it, it doesn't look quite as impressive as the Blood Angels launch box that was the last example of this kind of one. That was more like 47% off, even before counting the upgrade sprues, which pushed it to more like 60. I feel like maybe that one had excessive discount because quite a lot of the models within it weren't new ones though. Very much your standard Assault Intercessor style Death Company. Overall though, it seems a fairly typical launch box by Games Workshop standards. I think it's fairly safe to say, judging by the reaction to the reveal shows and how the last launch box sets have done, that it's going to have quite a lot of popularity and lots of people will be looking to pick it up. It's an entire box set worth of new plastic sculpts and not as questionably received as some of the more recent ones for 40k. The discount seems acceptable and useful if you do want the contents, and I'm sure quite a lot of guard players will be drawn to it to get their hands on the codex as soon as possible. As ever, maybe the datasheet cards do feel like a bit of an upsell, but they're one of the more handy things for reference if you are gaming with the army regularly. For possible downsides and criticisms, I think perhaps the biggest one is that not every single guard player necessarily wants to collect Death Korps. Games Workshop do seem to try and encourage a bit of mixing of regiments in armies these days. So I think there's quite a lot of people out there that just prefer to have the one unified theming for their force. Say they're a regiment of Cadians and that's what they're collecting. Or the same for Kathchan's Death Korps or something completely different. I feel like plenty of people aren't really going to want to mix regiments quite so much within the same army, even if they do quite like the miniatures. Not literally everyone's a Death Korps of Krieg fan though, even if they do have a good following. A lot of people prefer different aesthetics. But I feel like the general take is that Games Workshop have done their models for them pretty well if they're the sort of miniatures that you want. Otherwise, for downsides, as mentioned, there's really not that many points in the box. It's not exactly going to be one that really fills out a big chunk of a guard army in terms of points on the table. And otherwise, rules-wise, the artillery piece is quite likely to be kept niche in 10th edition. Though I guess it's not impossible that Games Workshop make it unusually good if it is a shiny new model they've got to sell people. Otherwise, I maybe do feel like a few of these could be possible to kit bash for other regiments as well. Say if you had a lot of Attilan Rough Riders already, I'm not 100% sure how many people are going to be rushing out to buy a large number of Death Riders as well, unless you want to do some sort of great big Charge of the Light Brigade style list. And I feel like the Combat Engineers wouldn't be the hardest units to kit bash out of, say, some Cadian spares if you had them. Overall though, as mentioned, I feel like the box set is probably going to be a fairly popular one. Hopefully Games Workshop will make enough to allow people to pick one up if they want one. They definitely can be a bit variable with that. Finally though, I'll just cycle back to talk about the channel's giveaway, which as mentioned will be for 8 viewers to win a copy of the Death Korps of Krieg box set, so hopefully it should be one way for a bunch of people to get one. As ever for the channel giveaways, there'll be 2 equal ways to enter, both linked down in the video description. Either you can enter by supporting the channel on Patreon for any amount whatsoever, that gets you automatic entry to each giveaway, and it's also the primary thing that supports me here on YouTube. Alternatively though, there's a completely free entry method via supporting on social media and boosting the algorithms. To do that you do these 3 actions: subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the Facebook page. And then after you've done that, the giveaway post appears on the 1st of January. That pops up on the channel Facebook page at midnight UK time and is active for 24 hours after that. Respond to that post with a picture of any 40k miniature or imagery, along with your name and date handwritten within the same photo. And then after 24 hours is up, I'll close the giveaway and do the draw. Everyone gets 1 entry and 1 entry only into a random number generator, which pulls out the 8 winners, and I announce them on the channel update video on the 4th of the month. I'm not sure as to the exact release date of this box set, but as mentioned, I suspect it'll probably be in early January. If it's a little bit later than that, the boxes will be posted out once I receive my orders of them. In any case, feel free to check that out, linked down in the video description. At time of recording as well, there's still time to enter for the big December one as well. That'll basically have the exact same rules but for the start of December. 4 winners for a $500 or £300 Warhammer 40k army. In any case, I'll leave that there for this one. What do you make of the Death Korps of Krieg launch box? Would you be tempted to pick one up or not? Look forward to hearing your opinions down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. If you'd like to support, there's other things on the channel's Patreon page as well as entry to the giveaways, things like seeing certain videos early, names in the credits and a few other things, so feel free to check that out. But otherwise an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.